I came back to Fort Collins in full dress uniform, thinking the hardest part of my leave would be burying my parents, not fighting my own sister. The funeral had been 2 days ago. We stood side by side at the cemetery like we were still a family. Angela hugged the neighbors, cried at the right times, and played the role of grieving daughter perfectly. I stayed quiet, letting her have the spotlight, because I was exhausted from months of deployments and the long flight home. That morning I was still wearing black when she cornered me in the kitchen. She didn't even sit down. "You can't stay here anymore," she said flatly, scrolling on her phone. "This house is mine now." I thought I'd misheard her. "What? You've been away for years. I'm the one who took care of Mom and Dad. I'm the one who paid the bills. This house is mine." She held up a paper she'd printed off the internet. 30 days. I'm giving you a heads up. No. I looked around at the same kitchen where we'd eaten cereal as kids, the same refrigerator covered with our school photos. "Angela, we just buried them. Are you serious?" She crossed her arms. "I'm serious. I already talked to a lawyer friend. You need to start packing. I'm a captain in Army logistics. I've moved entire battalions of gear through combat zones, but standing there with my sister treating me like a squatter made my stomach tighten. I didn't yell. I didn't even argue. I just asked, where am I supposed to go? There's a nice extended stay on Harmony Road. Weekly rates. Or maybe the VA has something. I can't keep supporting you." Supporting me? That word landed like a punch. I'd been wiring money home every month for years, even when I was in Kuwait. I'd paid the property taxes on this house myself, but I kept my voice steady. "Mom wanted me here." "Mom's gone," Angela said without a hint of emotion. "And this is my house now. Scott's moving in next week and we need the space." Scott. Her new boyfriend. I'd met him once at a barbecue. He sold insurance, wore shiny shoes, and called me ma'am, like it was a joke. I glanced at the dining table. My parents' mail still sat in a stack, unopened. Angela had started boxing up their dishes. She'd rented a dumpster in the driveway and had already tossed most of Dad's tools. Through the kitchen window, I could see the dumpster filling up with our childhood photo albums, old furniture, Mom's gardening books. "Why are you throwing away their things?" I asked. "Cleaning up junk," she said. "Scott doesn't want all this clutter. We're starting fresh." I reached into the trash pile and pulled out Mom's recipe box. The cards were splattered with decades of sauce and cake batter. Angela didn't even look at me. "You're throwing away our parents' lives," I said quietly. "They're not our parents anymore," she snapped. "They're gone. This is my house. You're just a guest who overstayed." I could feel the neighbors watching from across the street. The curtains moved as Mrs. Trent peeked out. This wasn't just family drama now. It was public humiliation. I took a breath. "I've been paying the taxes and insurance on this place for 10 years, Angela." She smirked. "With what? Your Army paycheck?" "Don't lie. I handled the bills." She had no idea. Mom had asked me to keep my help private so Angela wouldn't feel embarrassed. For years I'd honored that request. Angela shoved the printed notice into my hand. 30 days, that's more than fair. Fair. I looked down at the paper. It wasn't even real legal stationery, just something she'd copied from a website. But she was so sure of herself, so used to seeing me as the sister who left and came back only for holidays. I put the paper on the counter and said nothing. The kitchen clock ticked loud. Angela mistook my silence for surrender. "Good. I'm glad we're on the same page." She grabbed her phone and walked out, heels clicking on the hardwood. I stood alone, still holding Mom's recipe box, feeling the weight of every year I'd missed while serving. I had seen soldiers crumble under stress, but I'd never expected my own sister to turn on me like this. In the garage, my father's tool chest was locked with a new padlock. My name was still on the label maker strip he'd stuck to it 20 years ago. Val's Equipment. Angela had hung a handwritten sign, "Do not touch." I tried the lock. It didn't budge. "Security precaution," she'd probably say. "Can't be too careful." I looked around at the walls, at the nail holes where Dad's plaques used to hang, at the empty hooks where the garden tools had been. This was more than cleaning. It was erasing. When I walked back inside, Scott was there, leaning against the counter with a coffee mug. "Hey, Captain," he said with a smirk. "Angela tells me you're moving out." I didn't answer. He sipped his coffee. "She's been through a lot, you know, taking care of them while you were gone." I set Mom's recipe box on the counter. I sent money every month. Did she tell you that? He looked uncomfortable. She said she covered everything. I picked up my duffel bag and slung it over my shoulder. Good luck with the house, I said. He frowned. You're just going to leave? I walked past him without another word. On the porch, the cold March air hit me like a slap. The American flag I'd given Dad years ago was still folded in its triangle case by the door. The grass was patchy from winter, and the for sale sign for Scott's old condo lay against the wall. Across the street, Mrs. Trent stepped out with her dog. She gave me a small nod, the kind people give when they know something's wrong but don't want to intrude. I set my bag down and pulled out my phone. My leave paperwork said I had 20 days before I had to report back. That wasn't much time. Angela opened the door behind me. Don't forget your stuff in the guest room, she called. I turned, looked at her standing in the doorway of the house we'd both grown up in, and said, I'll get it later. She rolled her eyes. Just don't drag this out. I picked up my bag and walked to my car, the old Jeep I'd kept running since college. As I opened the door, I heard Scott inside asking Angela, Are you sure about this? Her answer was muffled, but the tone was sharp. The Jeep started on the first try. I drove down the street past the church where we'd just held the funeral. My uniform jacket was still folded on the passenger seat, the memorial program tucked inside. At a red light, I checked my bank app. The trust account was intact. The property tax payments were up to date. The paperwork was all there, just waiting. The light turned green. I kept driving, my mind already moving into mission mode. I didn't slam the steering wheel or cry. I'd learned a long time ago that in the Army, losing your temper never helps. Planning does. The house in the rearview mirror got smaller, but I didn't feel like I was leaving it behind. I knew exactly where every document was, every receipt, every transfer. I knew who to call and what to say. Angela thought she had the upper hand because she'd been living there. She thought rank in a family came from proximity, not from responsibility. I turned onto College Avenue and headed for Heritage First Bank. It was time to open a different kind of file. I pushed open the glass door of Heritage First Bank and felt the blast of warm air after the Colorado wind. The lobby smelled like new carpet and coffee. A teller recognized me from years ago and nodded politely, but I went straight for the offices in back. Janet Harrison, the branch manager, had handled my family's accounts for a decade. She looked up from her desk, surprised to see me in uniform. Valerie Brooks, she said, standing. It's been a while. Hi, Janet, I need a quiet room, I said. She led me into a small conference room and shut the door. My hands were steady as I opened my folder. Inside were copies of every property tax payment I'd made, the insurance policies, and the trust agreement my parents had signed. All the things Angela had never asked about because she didn't want to see the numbers. I'm guessing this isn't a social visit, Janet said. My sister thinks she owns my parents' house, I said. I'm going to need complete statements for the trust. Everything. From the first payment until now. Janet raised an eyebrow. You've been funding that property through Rocky Mesa Holdings all these years, right? That's right. Every check came from my Army pay. My parents asked me to keep it quiet so Angela wouldn't feel embarrassed. She has no idea? None, I said. And she just handed me a 30-day notice to vacate. Janet winced. She's in for a surprise. While she printed the records, I sat there thinking about how far back this went. When I'd first enlisted, Mom had cried on the porch and made me promise to stay close to Angela no matter what. Angela was already living at home after college, drifting from job to job. By the time I made captain, Dad's health was sliding. I wired money every month and never said a word. The statements Janet handed me were thick. She put them in a banker's box and slid it across the table. Every tax payment, insurance premium, and maintenance charge, she said. All under Rocky Mesa Holdings, LLC. Legally, you're the sole beneficiary. Perfect, I said. I'll need these ready for my attorney tomorrow. Thomas Keller still your guy? He is, I said. He's expecting my call. Walking back to the Jeep with that box of documents felt different from walking out of the house earlier. Angela saw me as a burden. In reality, I'd been holding the family together from a distance. At a red light, my mind drifted back to when Dad had called me from the hospital years ago. Angela had been there, complaining about bills. He'd whispered into the phone, "Don't tell her you're paying. She needs to feel like she's doing something." I'd agreed, thinking it was temporary, but temporary had turned into a decade. I pulled into a diner near the courthouse and grabbed a booth. My uniform drew a few glances, but no one bothered me. Over a plate of scrambled eggs, I started jotting names in a notebook. Keller, Harrison, Colonel McCarthy, neighbors who'd seen Angela's behavior. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I knew how to plan. Logistics is about anticipating problems before they happen. I remembered Christmases spent on video calls from overseas while Angela sat at that kitchen table pretending to be the one keeping the lights on. Mom would wave the phone around, show me the tree, thank me for the mystery checks that arrived just in time. I'd smile, play along, and hang up before my eyes gave me away. By the time I paid the check, I had a clear outline in my head. Step 1. Get all financial records. Step 2. Consult Keller. Step 3. Formal invitations to a will reading. My parents had updated their will 2 years ago, but Angela had never asked about it. Back in the Jeep, I drove past the old high school, the park where we'd played as kids, the thrift store where Angela used to volunteer. Everything looked the same, but felt different. This wasn't nostalgia anymore. It was evidence. When I turned onto Maple Street, the dumpster in the driveway was even fuller. Angela and Scott were on the porch with coffee mugs laughing. I parked at the curb and got out. Angela looked annoyed. "What are you doing back?" "I'm picking up some of my things," I said. "You need to call first," she said. "Scott's allergic to drama." Scott smirked. "Hey, Captain. Back already?" I ignored him and walked inside. The living room smelled like disinfectant and new paint. The family photos were gone from the walls. Boxes labeled "Donate" lined the hall. In my old room, the dresser drawers were empty. My uniforms were stacked on the bed. Angela had even put my medals in a plastic bag like they were junk. I gathered what I could into a duffel. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Trent across the street watering her plants even though it was cold out. She glanced up and gave me that same small nod. Angela appeared in the doorway. "You can't take the furniture," she said. "I bought this bed when I came home from Iraq," I said. "Doesn't matter. It's in the house. Do you have the receipt?" She hesitated. "Why would I?" I zipped the duffel without answering. She crossed her arms. "Look, Val, I'm sorry if this seems harsh, but you're not around. You don't know what it's been like taking care of them. I deserve this house. Scott and I are planning to remodel. We're even thinking about renting out rooms to pay the mortgage." "There is no mortgage," I said quietly. She blinked. "What?" I slung the bag over my shoulder and walked past her. Scott called from the kitchen. "Everything okay?" Angela snapped. "Stay out of it." I kept walking. On the porch, the wind cut through my uniform. I adjusted the duffel strap and headed for the Jeep. Behind me, I heard Angela's voice rising, accusing me of being ungrateful, of abandoning the family. At the curb, I paused. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Keller. "Got your message. Come by tomorrow at 10. Bring all records." I typed back, "On it." 1. Angela's shouting faded as I got in the Jeep and started the engine. She still didn't know that for 10 years she'd been living under my support. She didn't know the trust made me the owner. She didn't know anything except the story she'd built in her head about being the caretaker. As I drove away, I felt no rush of revenge, just a hard calm. Logistics had taught me patience. You don't rush a convoy through a minefield. You plan your route and execute. The bank box sat on the passenger seat like a silent witness. My father's name was still on some of the statements, my mother's handwriting on others. They'd trusted me to keep things steady, and I had. I turned onto College Avenue, heading back to my motel. Tomorrow I'd sit down with Keller, line up every piece of evidence, and let the facts speak for themselves. Angela could yell, Scott could smirk, neighbors could gossip. None of it changed what was in that box. I walked into Thomas Keller's office at 9:55 sharp, the banker's box heavy in my arms. Keller and Haynes LLP occupied a second-floor suite over a coffee shop downtown. Thomas had been my classmate at West Point before he went to law school. He still kept a photo on his desk of the two of us in cadet uniforms. He stood when I entered, tall and crisp in a gray suit. "Valerie," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Sit down. What's going on?" I set the box on the table and opened the lid. "My sister thinks she owns my parents' house," I said. "She gave me a 30-day notice to vacate. She has no idea about the trust." Thomas slid his reading glasses on and flipped through the top folder. "Rocky Mesa Holdings LLC," he read aloud. All property taxes, insurance premiums, and improvements paid out of this account. He whistled softly. You've been busy. 10 years, I said. Every month from my army pay. My parents asked me to keep it private to protect Angela's pride. All. He nodded. Classic. You're the invisible support and she's the visible caretaker. What's your goal? I want the facts on record. I don't want a screaming match in the driveway. I want a legal, clean outcome, and I want her to stop trashing our parents' things. Thomas tapped the table. Good. We'll do this by the book. Step 1. Formal notice of a will reading. Step 2. Produce every relevant document, deed, trust, tax records at that meeting. Step 3. Invite neutral witnesses. When she hears it all at once from multiple sources, she won't be able to spin it. I pulled a small envelope from my jacket. My mother's letter, I said. She left it in the safe deposit box with instructions to open only if necessary. It explains everything. Thomas opened it, scanned the first lines, and closed it again. That's gold. We'll keep it sealed until the meeting. No leaks. I looked at the clock. How fast can we organize this? He was already typing. Tomorrow afternoon. My conference room seats 12. We'll bring in Janet Harrison from Heritage First to confirm the payments. Anyone else you want present? I thought for a moment. My old commanding officer, Colonel Dean McCarthy. He's retired now, but he knows how much I've sent home. He can vouch for the transfers from my deployment accounts. Good idea, Thomas said. And maybe a neighbor or two who's witnessed her behavior. Marcus Trent across the street and Cynthia Morales next door, I said. They've seen plenty. Thomas grinned. You're thinking like an officer assembling a battle staff. I shrugged. It's what I know. He printed a stack of formal invitations on firm letterhead. Hand deliver these today if you can. It'll make it harder for her to claim she didn't know. I left his office with the invitations in my bag, feeling the familiar clarity of mission planning. Years of logistics had taught me that a successful operation starts with solid prep, not flashy moves. My first stop was the post office to rent a larger box for future mail. I didn't want Angela intercepting anything. Then I swung by the motel, changed out of my uniform into jeans and a fleece, and started knocking on doors. Mrs. Morales answered hers with a toddler on her hip. Valerie, how are you holding up? I'm fine, I said. I need a favor. Would you be willing to attend a reading of my parents' will tomorrow at my lawyer's office? You've seen some of the things happening at the house. Your presence would help keep it civil. She shifted the toddler. Of course. We were all shocked when Angela started tossing your parents' stuff. Just tell me where and when. I gave her an invitation and thanked her. Across the street, Marcus Trent was in his garage tuning his snowblower. He wiped his hands when he saw me. Heard things got rough over there, he said. You could say that, I replied. I'm holding a legal meeting tomorrow. Would you come? Absolutely, he said without hesitation. Your folks were good people. I've got photos from last summer when Angela threw your dad's plaques in the dumpster. Could be useful? That would be very useful, I said. By late afternoon, I had the neighbors lined up. I sat in the Jeep outside the house for a long minute before going in. Scott's BMW was in the driveway. Through the front window, I could see Angela at the dining table with a laptop, piles of papers around her. I opened the door without knocking. She looked up, startled. What are you doing? I'm here to deliver this. I placed the envelope on the table. She picked it up and read the header. Notice of will reading. What is this? Tomorrow at 2. Keller and Haynes downtown. You're invited. I don't need to go to some dog and pony show, she said. This house is already mine. You'll want to be there, I said evenly. Scott came out of the kitchen drying his hands. What's going on? Nothing, Angela snapped. She's just trying to make trouble. I looked at Scott. Bring whatever proof you have of ownership. His brow furrowed. Proof? Yes, I said. Deed, mortgage paperwork, tax records. Anything that shows your claim. Angela glared. We don't have to show you anything. I turned to leave. Then you'll hear it tomorrow with everyone else. Behind me, she called. Don't think you can scare me with your army tricks. I didn't answer. Outside, the air smelled of snow. I slid behind the wheel and texted Thomas. Invites delivered. Neighbors on board. Banker confirmed. McCarthy confirmed. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. I ignored the symbol but smiled at the efficiency. As dusk fell, I drove to a small diner on Mulberry Street where Colonel McCarthy liked to have coffee. He was already at a booth, reading the paper. His hair had gone white, but his posture was still straight as a rifle. "Captain Brooks," he said as I sat down. "Heard you're in a domestic firefight." "More like a logistics problem," I said. He chuckled. "Same thing in the end. What do you need from me?" "Tomorrow at 2. Keller and Haynes. I need you to confirm the transfers from my deployment accounts and the allotments to Rocky Mesa Holdings." "Happy to," he said. "I always wondered how you were keeping that house afloat." "Mom asked me not to tell Angela," I said. "Pride's a dangerous thing," he replied. We drank coffee in silence for a moment. I could hear the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the low hum of other conversations. Outside the window, the streetlights flickered on. "I appreciate this, sir," I said. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be messy." "I can handle messy," I said. When I left the diner, the sky was turning purple. Snowflakes drifted down, catching in the headlights of passing cars. I zipped up my fleece and walked to the Jeep, feeling the old pre-mission focus settle over me. Every piece was in place. The documents, the witnesses, the banker, the commanding officer. Back at the motel, I spread everything out on the bed: statements, deeds, the sealed letter from Mom. I checked and double-checked every page. Then I packed it all into a single slim binder. No surprises. The motel room smelled of cleaning solution and old carpet. The heater rattled. I sat at the desk writing a short statement for tomorrow. Nothing dramatic, just a clear outline of facts. Years of briefing commanders had taught me the value of clarity over theatrics. I closed the binder and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since the funeral, I felt my breathing slow. This wasn't about revenge. It was about setting things right and keeping my parents' wishes. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. I turned off the lamp, left the binder on the nightstand, and lay down. The hum of traffic on the highway was steady, like white noise. In the morning, there would be no shouting, no accusations, just documents and signatures. Whatever Angela thought she owned, the truth was about to stand in front of her in black and white. Snow crunched under my boots as I walked up the driveway the next morning. The dumpster was gone, but a moving truck was parked in its place. Scott's voice floated from inside the house, giving instructions. I pushed the door open without knocking. Angela was in the living room, taping boxes. The family portraits that had hung there for decades were stacked face down against the wall. She glanced at me, eyes cold. "You can't just walk in anymore," she said. "It's still my parents' house," I said. "It's my house now," she snapped. "Scott's moving his stuff in today. Mitt." I looked past her. 2 men I didn't know were carrying in a sectional sofa. Scott stood by the door, pointing where he wanted it. Angela turned back to me. "You need to pick up your things and leave. I've already changed the locks on the garage. Don't try to get your tools." I stared at her. "You locked up my equipment?" "Security," she said. "Can't be too careful. Some of those tools are worth a lot. We don't want anything disappearing." End of quote. Those were my tools, thousands of dollars of professional-grade gear I'd collected over decades, much of it bought with my re-enlistment bonuses. She had no idea. Scott came over, wiping his hands. "Hey, Captain," he said with a fake smile. "We're just trying to get organized. Angela's been under a lot of stress. Maybe you could make this easier by moving out sooner." I ignored him and walked toward the kitchen. The smell of bleach hit me. The cabinets were empty, shelves bare. Mom's china was gone. "Where are Mom's dishes?" I asked. "Sold them," Angela said. "Estate sale online. We're starting fresh." I felt my jaw tighten. "You're selling their things before the will is even read." She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "There's no mystery will. Everything comes to me. You're a guest here, Valerie. You don't have a claim." Through the front window, I could see neighbors gathering. Mrs. Morales was at her mailbox. Marcus was across the street with his phone out, pretending to scroll, but obviously watching. Angela noticed them too, and raised her voice. "You're embarrassing yourself. You've been gone for years. You didn't take care of them. I did. This is my reward." I turned slowly to face her. "Your reward?" "Yes," she said. "And I'm tired of you acting like some kind of hero. You left. You don't belong here." Scott shifted uncomfortably. "Angela." She spun on him. "Don't you start." End quote. I walked to the hall closet and opened it. Empty. Even my army dress blues were gone. Where are my uniforms? In storage, she said. We needed the space. Storage where? She shrugged. Doesn't matter. You're leaving anyway. I looked at Scott. Do you know where my things are? He avoided my eyes. Angela handled it. I took a breath and said nothing. Years in the army had taught me when not to argue. Instead, I stepped out onto the porch. The cold air cleared my head. Across the street, Marcus raised his eyebrows in silent question. I gave him a slight nod. Angela followed me outside. Don't try to make me look bad in front of the neighbors, she hissed. You're doing that yourself, I said quietly. Her cheeks flushed. You think you're so much better than me because you wear a uniform? Because you go overseas? You have no idea what I've sacrificed. I met her eyes. I know exactly what I've sacrificed. 1. She opened her mouth to retort, but Scott called from inside. Angela, the movers need you. She shot me a glare and went back in. I walked down the driveway, pulling my phone from my pocket. Marcus crossed the street. You okay? He asked under his breath. I'm fine, I said. Thank you for being here. He glanced toward the house. I've been taking pictures, he murmured. Everything they're moving in, everything they're throwing out. Date stamped, you might need it. Akai. I appreciate it, I said. Back in my Jeep, I sat for a long moment watching the house. Scott and the movers carried in another load. Angela barked orders like she owned the place. I drove to a storage facility on the edge of town. The manager looked up my name and shook his head. Nothing under Brooks, he said. Figures. Angela had either lied or stored my belongings under her own name. I went back to the motel and laid out tomorrow's binder again, checking each tab. The section labeled Property Ownership held the deed showing Rocky Mesa Holdings as the buyer in 1998. Another section held tax records, insurance policies, and maintenance receipts. In the back pocket was Mom's sealed letter. I pulled out a notepad and wrote a short plan for the morning. Meet Keller at IT Tradio for final prep. Arrive at office early, set up documents. Confirm attendance of Janet Harrison, Colonel McCarthy, Marcus, and Cynthia. Bring invitation copies and ID. Then I added a line at the bottom. Stay calm no matter what. The motel TV droned on in the background about a snowstorm heading for the mountains. I muted it. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet Harrison. All records printed and ready. See you tomorrow. A second text from Colonel McCarthy. I'll be there at 1,400. Hang in. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes for a moment. In my head, I could still hear Angela's voice shouting that I didn't belong, that she deserved the house. It wasn't anger I felt, but a kind of weary clarity. When I opened my eyes, the binder sat neatly on the table, each page in order. Everything I needed was already lined up. All I had to do was walk in and present it. At 6 p.m., I drove past the house again on my way to pick up takeout. Lights glowed in every window. Scott's SUV was in the driveway next to the moving truck. Through the curtains, I caught a glimpse of Angela at the dining table with a bottle of wine, laughing at something Scott said. Mrs. Morales stood on her porch holding her toddler, watching the house with a frown. When she saw me, she lifted a hand in greeting. I gave a quick wave and kept driving. The smell of fried chicken filled the Jeep as I headed back to the motel. Outside, the first flakes of snow were starting to fall. I parked, grabbed the food, and went inside. I ate straight from the box, glancing at the binder every few minutes. Years of operations had trained me to check my gear before a mission, even when I knew it was ready. By the time I finished dinner, the snow had begun to stick on the sidewalks. I put the empty box in the trash, zipped my duffel, and set the alarm on my phone. The room was quiet except for the heater's hum. I slid the binder into my bag and placed it by the door. Everything was in place. Tomorrow was just another briefing, another operation, another set of facts to present. I turned off the light and lay down, my mind clear and steady, the way it always was before a mission. The alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., and I was already sitting up, boots on, bag packed. Snow covered the parking lot in a clean white layer. I brushed it off the windshield and drove toward downtown Fort Collins while the sky turned pale gray. My hands on the steering wheel were steady, my mind sharper than it had been in days. When I walked into Keller & Associates, the warmth and smell of coffee hit me. Thomas Keller stood at the reception desk in a navy suit, holding a stack of folders. "You're early, Valerie," he said. "I like to set the room," I replied. We went to the conference room. Long oak table, 12 leather chairs, polished windows looking over College Avenue. I laid out the binders, each tab marked with color-coded stickers. Keller watched me, nodding. "This looks like a field briefing," he said. "It is," I answered. "Different battlefield, same prep." Janet Harrison arrived next, efficient as always, carrying a briefcase. She set it down and opened it without a word, pulling out neatly clipped stacks of bank records, tax receipts, and payment histories. "Every check, every transfer from Rocky Mesa Holdings LLC since 1998, she said. "No gaps. That." "Perfect," I said. Then Colonel Dean McCarthy came in, tall and straight-backed, despite his retirement. He gave me a firm handshake. "Captain Brooks," he said, "I brought my statement about your service record and character. Might help counter Angela's narrative." "It will," I said. "Thank you for coming." He gave me a small smile. "Never leave a soldier behind, right?" Keller raised an eyebrow. "You weren't kidding when you said you had support." We arranged the seating. Keller at the head, Janet on one side with the records, Colonel McCarthy on the other. Across from them would sit Angela, Scott, and any neighbors we'd invited. Marcus texted that he was on his way with his photos. Cynthia Morales had agreed to come too. I went over my checklist again. "Janet, you'll confirm the payments and ownership records. Colonel, you'll vouch for my character. Marcus will show the timeline photos. Keller, you handle the legal presentation." Keller nodded. "You stay calm, answer only what's asked, and let me do the heavy lifting." I smiled. I've been calm under worse fire. The clock showed 1:45 p.m. when Marcus and Cynthia arrived. Marcus handed me a thumb drive. "Everything's time, stamped and in order," he said quietly. "Movers, boxes, new furniture, the whole week's worth." Cynthia looked nervous. "I just want to tell the truth," she said. "I saw how she treated you. People should know." "That's all I ask," I said. Keller closed the door. "All right, everyone," he said. "We're ready." The next afternoon, a pale winter sun glinted off the ice as I stepped out of my Jeep, binder tucked under my arm. Keller's conference room was already filled when I arrived. Janet and Colonel McCarthy seated on one side, Marcus and Cynthia on the other, each with folders and phones ready. The smell of strong coffee hung in the air, the kind that meant business was about to get done. I closed the door quietly, scanning the table. Every document was lined up exactly as we'd planned. Janet caught my eye and gave a small nod. Marcus adjusted his camera, prepared to document the proceedings. At 2:02 p.m., Angela walked in with Scott trailing behind her. She wore a heavy black coat and an expression that tried to be composed but cracked at the edges. Scott's jaw was tight. His eyes darted around the room like he was looking for an exit. They took the seats opposite Keller. Keller cleared his throat. "Good afternoon, everyone. We're here to read the last will and testament of Robert and Elaine Brooks, and to clarify the ownership of 2148 Timberline Drive." Angela leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "This is unnecessary," she said. "We already know what's in the will." "We'll proceed anyway," Keller replied evenly. He opened the first folder and read the bequests aloud. Personal mementos, small donations, a trust for grandchildren. Angela's expression softened as she listened, maybe expecting her name to dominate every line. When he finished, she smiled faintly, like she'd just won a hand of cards. But then Keller picked up a thicker folder. "Before we finalize those items, we must address the primary asset," he said. Angela's eyes narrowed. "What primary asset?" "The house." Keller slid a document across the table. "This is the recorded warranty deed for 2148 Timberline Drive, purchased the 15th of March 1998 by Rocky Mesa Holdings LLC, representative signature, Valerie Brooks." Angela blinked, then let out a short laugh. "That's a fake. My parents owned that house." Janet quietly spread out 2 decades of tax and insurance records. "Every payment from 1,998 to the present originated from Miss Brooks' business account," she said. "None from Robert or Elaine Brooks. None from Angela Whitman." "Ah." Scott reached for the papers. "This can't be right," he muttered. Flipping through them like a magic trick would reveal itself. "It's correct," Janet said calmly. Heritage First Bank processed every payment. I personally handled the accounts. Angela's cheeks flushed. But they told me it was mine. They said I'd get the house when they were gone. Keller's tone stayed level. They allowed you to live there. They did not transfer ownership. Colonel McCarthy spoke up, voice steady. Miss Whitman, I served with your sister. She used her reenlistment bonuses and hazard pay to keep that house safe and to support your parents. She asked for nothing in return. Angela turned on him. Why are you even here? Because truth matters, he said. Marcus set his laptop on the table and clicked through photos taken from his porch. Movers carrying in Scott's furniture, boxes labeled Mom's China, stacked by the curb, Angela pointing and shouting. Each frame bore a clear date and time. These were taken this week, Marcus said. They show how Miss Whitman treated her sister's property and belongings. Angela snapped. You had no right to take pictures. I was on my own porch, Marcus replied. Scott rubbed his temple. Angela, maybe we should listen. Don't, she hissed. Keller opened another folder. This is a letter from Elaine Brooks, written in 2017 and held in our files. Would you like me to read it? Yes, I said. He read aloud. Valerie, your service has made it possible for us to stay in our home. Angela believes she'll inherit it someday, but we want you to retain ownership, so you always have a base to come back to. Please keep this letter with our attorney for safekeeping. The room went dead quiet. Snow hissed softly against the windows. Angela stared at the table. Scott shifted in his chair, suddenly interested in the floor. Keller's tone hardened. Miss Whitman, last week you served Valerie Brooks with a 30-day eviction notice from her own property and locked her out of her personal equipment. This constitutes illegal exclusion and destruction of property. Today, you're being served with a 30-day notice to vacate. He slid the paper across the table. Scott's hand trembled as he picked it up. This is insane. It's legal, Keller said. Cynthia spoke up, her voice steady. I watched you throw out your parents' things, Angela. I saw you humiliate your sister in front of everyone. Angela glared at her. Stay out of this. No, Cynthia said. People should know the truth. Colonel McCarthy folded his arms. You can't bully your way through this one. Angela's eyes darted from one face to another, looking for someone to back her up. No one moved. I sat quietly, breathing slow and even, hands clasped on the table. Scott pushed his chair back and stood. I need some air, he muttered, walking out. Angela stayed seated, staring at the eviction notice. Her fingers clenched around it until the paper creased. Keller explained the next steps: inventory of belongings, supervised removal, transfer of keys. Janet detailed the financial records she'd bring to court if needed. Colonel McCarthy offered to coordinate moving my equipment back into my possession. Marcus saved the photos onto a thumb drive for Keller's file. Angela finally whispered, I didn't know. No, I said softly. You didn't want to know. She looked up at me, eyes wet but angry. You're doing this to punish me. I'm doing this to protect what's mine, I said. Keller had Angela sign acknowledgement of the notice. Janet had me countersign. The colonel placed his statement into Keller's folder. Marcus backed up his files to an external drive. The room was quiet except for the scratch of pens and the shuffle of paper. Outside, the snow kept falling, muffling the street noise. Inside, every fact lay on the table, clear and undeniable. I zipped my binder, checked that each document was still in place, and rose from my chair. Angela stayed seated, staring at her hands. She didn't look up as I walked past. The elevator doors opened silently. I stepped inside, the binder tucked under my arm, and pressed the button for the lobby. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel, steady and unsmiling. The doors closed with a soft click. The elevator doors opened into the lobby and the smell of cold air hit me as I stepped outside. The city noises were muted by snow, but a low murmur of voices drifted from the sidewalk. A handful of people with phones out stood near the building entrance, neighbors, maybe a local reporter. They weren't looking at me, they were looking at Angela. She was standing just beyond the awning, coat open despite the cold, shouting into her phone. Scott was nowhere in sight. Her other hand clutched the eviction notice like a lifeline. When she saw me, her face contorted anger, shock, maybe humiliation all at once. You're ruining my life, she hissed as I passed. I'm enforcing my rights, I said quietly. She followed me down the steps. You think you're so noble because you were in the army? You don't know what it's like to be left behind. I stopped and turned to face her. I know exactly what it's like to be left behind. That's why I sent money every month. That's why I kept the house off the market. That's why Mom and Dad stayed comfortable until the end. Her voice cracked. They told me they loved me more. I shook my head slowly. They loved us both. They just didn't tell you everything because they knew how you'd react. Angela's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then flinched. One of the bystanders held up a screen showing a news alert. Local veteran legally reclaims family home after being evicted by sister. Comments scrolled under it, full of sympathy for me and anger at her. She turned pale. Who's feeding them this? No one has to, I said. The facts are public. Her knees wobbled and she sat down hard on the icy step. For a moment, she looked like the girl who used to wait for me at the bus stop after school. Small and lost. I crouched beside her. Angela, you need to get a lawyer who will tell you the truth. Not what you want to hear. The sooner you face it, the sooner you can rebuild. Okay. She covered her face with her hands. Scott's gone. He said he didn't sign up for this. That's his choice, I said. She looked up at me, eyes red. I don't have anywhere to go. You have 30 days, I said quietly. Use them wisely. Inside the building, Keller held the door for Janet and Colonel McCarthy. They gave me small nods as they passed. Marcus stayed back a moment, holding up his phone. Do you want me to keep recording? He asked softly. No, I said. She doesn't need an audience for this part. He slipped his phone into his coat. For what it's worth, everyone's on your side now. It's not about sides, I said. It's about facts. I helped Angela to her feet. Go home. Call someone you trust. Start making a plan. She pulled away, still clutching the paper, and walked to her car. The onlookers parted silently as she passed. No jeers, no cheers. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the story had shifted. Back at the motel, I hung my coat, set the binder on the table, and turned on the coffee maker. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Neighbors are talking. She's telling people you forged papers. I typed back, let them talk. Facts will hold. That night, Fort Collins felt small. Every time I stopped for gas or coffee, someone looked at me like they'd heard something. At the grocery store, 2 women whispered near the deli counter, glancing my way. One of them finally approached. Captain Brooks? She asked softly. I'm sorry about what your sister's saying. We know what kind of person you are. Thank you, I said simply. By morning, the rumors had multiplied. Scott's posts on social media claimed I'd tricked my parents that I was stealing the house. He posted a picture of himself on the porch looking sad, captioned, "Kicked out of my own home by my own sister." The comments were full of sympathy for him until Marcus started dropping links to county property records, showing Rocky Mesa Holdings as the owner. Screenshots of Keller's letterhead appeared in the thread. Within hours, the tide turned. Angela must have seen it. Around noon, she called me for the first time in weeks. Valerie, she said without preamble, you need to tell people this isn't what it looks like. End quote. What exactly do you think it looks like? That you're evicting me, she snapped. People are attacking me online. You handed me a 30-day notice to leave my own property, I said calmly. You threw out Mom's things. You changed the locks on my equipment. You created this. She went silent. I didn't think it would go like this, she muttered finally. You thought I'd roll over. Maybe I thought you'd have some compassion, she said, voice rising again. I took care of them while you were gone. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but kept my tone even. And I paid every bill so you could. She hung up without another word. Later that day, Colonel McCarthy called. She's calling around trying to find a lawyer, he said. She's also trying to get statements from your old unit about your deployments. Classic desperation move. Let her, I said. Janet emailed me scans of Angela's evidence, random text messages, and photos of her cleaning the house. Nothing connected to ownership. She has nothing, Janet wrote. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived at Keller's office from a lawyer representing Angela. It was a half-page demand claiming constructive ownership and emotional damages. Keller scanned it to me with a note. This won't hold. Not in Colorado. How? Meanwhile, Neighbors who'd avoided me for weeks started stopping by the motel with casseroles, coffee, or just quiet support. Cynthia dropped off a folder of screenshots showing Scott's posts about moving in before the will was read. Marcus compiled a timeline with his photos and videos. The story had shifted from a family squabble to a community reckoning. Angela must have sensed it slipping. She started calling mutual relatives. My uncle in Phoenix left me a voicemail. She says you're going to put her on the street. Is that true? I called him back, explained the documents, sent copies. He called me again later, embarrassed. She left out a few details, he admitted. Scott posted one more dramatic update him in front of the house with boxes, claiming he'd been betrayed. Within minutes, commenters were pointing out he'd only been dating Angela for 4 months and had no legal tie to the property. By nightfall, his post had more laughing emojis than hearts. He deleted it. Then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you're so smart. Watch your back. No name. Just that. I stared at it for a long second, then forwarded it to Keller and Colonel McCarthy. Keller replied, "Save everything. We'll present to judge if needed." The colonel texted back, "Classic intimidation. Documented. Stay steady." The next morning, Marcus sent me a video clip from his porch camera. It showed Scott sneaking around the side of the house at midnight with a flashlight, trying to get into the garage, Marcus wrote, left when he saw my camera light. I forwarded it to Keller. "We'll add this to the restraining order motion," he replied. Angela's calls grew more frantic. She left a voicemail crying, then another one shouting. In one, she accused me of ruining her life. In another, she begged me to make it stop. Each time I saved the messages, labeling them with the date. Janet called to update me. Her bank account's overdrawn. Scott's name isn't on the mortgage because there is no mortgage. She's about to realize she can't refinance what she doesn't own. Keep everything documented, I said. That evening, I drove past the house again. The porch light was off. Scott's SUV was gone. Angela's car sat crooked in the driveway. Curtains drawn. The neighborhood was quiet except for the crunch of my tires on snow. I didn't feel triumph, just inevitability. Back at the motel, I poured a cup of coffee and opened my notebook. Under tomorrow's date, I wrote, "House inspection scheduled. Contact city about zoning for Veterans Center. Confirm Keller hearing." The heater rattled softly. Outside, snowflakes spiraled past the window under the streetlight. I flipped the notebook shut and leaned back, letting the quiet settle. I woke before dawn to the muted sound of snowplows scraping the street outside the motel. The heater hummed in the corner, the same steady tone that had kept me calm through every briefing. I swung my feet to the floor and started the coffee maker. Today wasn't about surprises, it was about execution. By 8 a.m., I was parked in front of Keller's office again, binder under my arm, duffel at my feet. Inside, Janet Harrison was already at the conference table with a fresh stack of documents, and Keller was on the phone with the county clerk. He waved me in. "We have the emergency hearing at 10, he said. "Judge Ramirez, she's read everything." Janet handed me a copy of our filing. "Restraining order for your sister and her boyfriend. Immediate possession motion. Inventory of your equipment. Everything signed, sealed, and ready." I flipped through the pages. Every signature line had a neat blue scrawl. Every exhibit had a colored tab. Years of staff work in the Army made me appreciate the order. "Looks solid," I said. At 9:45, we walked into the small courtroom on the second floor. High ceiling, wooden benches, faint smell of old paper and coffee. Judge Ramirez sat at the bench, glasses low on her nose, flipping through our packet. Angela was already there, sitting with a public defender who looked like he'd been handed the case 15 minutes earlier. Scott sat behind them, arms folded, avoiding my eyes. The judge cleared her throat. "We're here on an emergency motion regarding 2148 Timberline Drive. Miss Brooks, you're the petitioner?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And Miss Whitman, you've been served notice?" Angela's lawyer nodded. "We received the papers yesterday." "Proceed," the judge said. Keller stood, voice calm. "Your Honor, my client is the legal owner of the property at issue. The respondent served her with an illegal eviction notice, locked her out of personal property worth over $50,000, and has been disposing of sentimental belongings. We're requesting immediate possession and a temporary restraining order." The judge glanced at Angela. "Response?" Her lawyer shuffled papers. "We believe there's a constructive ownership claim. Miss Whitman cared for the decedents and was promised the house. Do you have a deed or payment records? The judge asked. No, Your Honor. But, the judge said. Colorado doesn't recognize constructive ownership in this context. Without a deed or payments, there's no claim. She turned to Keller. I'm granting immediate possession and the true. Sheriff's Department will serve the order today. Respondent has 72 hours to vacate. Angela's mouth fell open. You can't do this! I just did, the judge said flatly. Scott muttered something under his breath. The judge's gavel came down once. Next case, she said. We walked out into the hallway while Angela and her lawyer stayed behind. Janet handed me a certified copy of the order. You're officially back in control, she said. Good, I said. Let's get my equipment. By noon, the sheriff's deputy met us at the house. A light snow was falling, turning the driveway slick. Angela's car was gone. Scott's SUV sat crookedly near the curb, trunk open, boxes spilling out. The deputy knocked on the door. Scott opened it, pale and jittery. We're here under a court order, the deputy said. Everyone not on the deed needs to leave while we conduct the inventory. One, Scott stammered. Angela went to her sister's. She said she'd be back. Pack your things, the deputy said. You've got 3 days. Inside, the house looked like a halfway unpacked showroom. Mom's old curtains were down, replaced by bare blinds. The kitchen smelled of bleach and takeout. My tools were stacked in the garage under a tarp. I walked through each room with the deputy, Janet noting serial numbers as we checked my equipment. The colonel showed up to help carry the heavier pieces into my truck. Marcus filmed quietly from the porch for documentation. Scott hovered in the living room, hands jammed into his pockets. I didn't know it was like this, he muttered. You didn't ask, I said without looking up. By 2 p.m. my equipment was loaded, receipts signed, photos taken. The deputy taped a copy of the court order to the front door. You're free to change the locks now, he told me. I nodded. Already scheduled. That. Janet handed me a folder with the locksmith's info. They'll be here at 4. Scott sat on the bottom stair holding his head. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my decision, I said evenly. The same courtesy you extended to me applies to you 3 days. He looked up, eyes rimmed red. She said it was hers. She said she owned it. She was wrong, I said. I walked him to the door. Outside, the colonel was strapping the last case of tools into my truck. Marcus lowered his phone and said quietly, whole neighborhoods watching from their windows. Let them, I said. The locksmith arrived early, a wiry man in a blue parka. Within half an hour, the old locks were in a bucket, and new ones clicked into place. He handed me a set of keys. Front, back, garage, he said, all yours now. I stood in the entryway, turning one of the keys in my hand. The house felt different, quieter, but solid. Not a museum of my parents anymore, not a stage for Angela's drama, but a place with walls and a roof and a future. Janet packed up her briefcase. I'll file the final paperwork with the county this week, she said. Thank you, I said. The colonel clapped a hand on my shoulder. You handled this the right way. Clean, by the book. It's how we're trained, I said. He smiled. Now, you can start building what you wanted here. That. I walked them both to the door and watched as their cars pulled away. Marcus lingered on the porch. You okay? He asked. I'm fine, I said. He nodded. Call if you need another witness. When he left, the house was silent except for the soft hiss of the heater. I walked through each room slowly, checking locks, flipping light switches, touching door frames like they were old friends. In the garage, I ran my hand over the stacked cases of tools. Years of work, now back under my control. In the kitchen, I opened the cabinet and found one of Mom's mugs Angela had missed. I poured water into it from the tap, took a sip, and leaned against the counter. Through the window, snow drifted past the streetlight. Across the street, Cynthia Morales stood on her porch watching. She gave me a small wave. I raised the mug in return. No speeches, no victory lap, just a quiet return to what had always been mine. I set the mug down, pulled out my notebook, and wrote 3 lines under tomorrow's date. Schedule contractor walkthrough for Veterans Center. Mate Councilman Riley about zoning. Sort remaining belongings into keep divided by donate. Then I closed the notebook and set it next to the new keys on the counter. The house was warm, steady, and silent. Late afternoon, light slanted through the kitchen windows, highlighting dust motes swirling above the bare floor. I had been moving steadily for hours, sorting boxes Angela had left behind, bagging up trash, setting aside items to donate. Each room felt lighter as the clutter disappeared. The front door opened and Cynthia Morales stepped in, balancing a casserole dish. "I figured you probably haven't had time to cook," she said. "Thank you," I said, taking it from her hands. "It's starting to look like a house again." She glanced around. "It already feels different." I led her to the dining table. Only one chair remained from the old set, and I'd been using it as a work stool. She smiled at the empty space. "Looks like you're making it yours," she said. "That's the idea," I replied. She patted my arm. "You deserve some peace, Valerie." Then she left quietly, closing the door behind her. I ate standing at the counter, looking over the Veterans Center plans spread across the table. The living room would become a reception area, Dad's old den, a small classroom, the upstairs bedrooms transitional housing for veterans starting over. I'd spoken with a contractor that morning, and he was drawing up estimates. By evening, a few more neighbors stopped by. Marcus helped me carry out an old dresser. The colonel dropped off a stack of contacts, local nonprofits, grant writers, and a list of potential volunteers. Mrs. Morales returned with her husband, offering to host a block meeting to introduce the idea. For the first time in months, people weren't whispering about me. They were showing up. I worked late into the night, scrubbing the kitchen counters, polishing the old woodwork, replacing burned-out bulbs. When I finally sat down, the house was quiet but no longer heavy. It felt like a starting point, not a battleground. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing. A message from Councilman Riley. "Meeting approved. City interested in supporting Veterans Center. Can you come downtown at 11? At 11 sharp, I was in a small conference room at City Hall, binder of sketches and budgets open on the table. Riley and two staffers listened as I laid out my plan: renovate the house into a center, offer classes, job training, and counseling. I spoke plainly, like an operations briefing. When I finished, Riley nodded. "You've done your homework," he said. "We can help with zoning and maybe connect you to a grant program." "Appreciate it," I said. As I walked out, I felt the same quiet confidence I'd felt after a successful mission. No cheering, just a job moving forward. Back at the house, a delivery truck arrived with new locks for the garage and a stack of paint samples. I signed for them, then spent the afternoon walking through each room with the contractor, pointing out walls to remove, windows to replace, areas to reinforce. He took notes quickly, asking practical questions. When we finished, he said, "You're basically turning this place inside out." "Exactly," I said. "It's time it served more than one family." Later, as I cleared out the last of Angela's boxes from the guest room, I found a small jewelry case tucked under some papers. Inside was Mom's silver cross necklace, something I'd assumed Angela had sold. A folded note lay beneath it in Angela's handwriting. "I couldn't pawn this. Thought you should have it." I sat on the bed holding the necklace, feeling a mix of surprise and something softer. Without thinking, I slipped it into my pocket. By evening, the house was buzzing. Volunteers from a local veterans group had arrived to help clear the basement. Marcus and two teenagers from down the street hauled old furniture to the curb. Mrs. Morales brought coffee and cookies. The colonel directed the flow of boxes like it was a supply drop. We worked until the sun dipped below the horizon, then gathered in the living room on folding chairs. The smell of coffee mixed with fresh paint samples. Marcus played a short video on his phone showing the transformation so far: rooms cleared, plans on the walls, neighbors pitching in. "Looks like a mission coming together," the colonel said. "Feels like it," I replied. No one mentioned Angela or Scott. The story had already shifted. When the volunteers left, I locked the new doors and walked through the quiet house. The floors creaked under my boots, but instead of echoing with tension, the sound felt steady. Upstairs, the rooms were empty but full of potential. In the kitchen, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Finalize contractor contract. Made grant writer Thursday. Plan open house for neighbors next month." I set the notebook beside Mom's necklace on the counter. Outside, snow melted into slush, and the street glistened under the streetlights. The house no longer felt like a secret or a hiding place. It felt like a tool one I could use to build something bigger than myself. Later that night, As I closed the blinds and turned off the lights, my phone buzzed again. A message from a former platoon member now living in Denver. Heard what you're doing, proud of you. Let me know if you need volunteers. I typed back, thanks, I'll keep you posted. Then I set the phone down and listened to the quiet hum of the house. No gloating, no drama, just steady movement toward a new purpose. I climbed the stairs, flicked off the hall light, and paused for a moment at the top. The air smelled of sawdust and coffee. The house felt lighter, but solid under my hand on the railing. Downstairs, the heater clicked on. Warm air moving through the vents like a heartbeat. In my room, plans and sketches lay neatly stacked, ready for tomorrow's work. I sat on the edge of the bed, boots still on, and looked around. The walls were bare now, but I could already see where the new paint would go, where the plaques honoring service members would hang, where the training schedules would be posted. I lay back without pulling off my boots, one arm under my head, and let the steady sound of the heater fill the room. This was no longer about fighting to stay, it was about building forward. Morning light poured through the new blinds, catching on fresh paint cans stacked in the hall. The smell of primer hung in the air, mixed with coffee brewing in the kitchen. I stepped over drop cloths, boots leaving clean prints on the tarp. This was my daily routine, now quiet work, steady progress. The Veterans Center was no longer an idea on paper. In the living room, volunteers were measuring walls for new drywall. The colonel was out back directing the installation of a small ramp. Marcus had set up a folding table with a laptop to handle social media updates. Neighbors wandered in with tool belts and boxes of donated supplies. The sound of saws and hammers replaced the silence that had once filled these rooms. I moved from station to station, answering questions, signing receipts, making coffee runs. It felt like running an operation, clear objectives, moving parts, people trusting me to keep it on track. No shouting, no chaos, no drama, just work. By noon, the first upstairs room had fresh paint. The old guest room where Angela had packed my uniforms was now pale blue with new carpet. We'd already installed 2 bunk beds donated by a local furniture store. In the corner sat a small desk and a framed flag one of my old squad mates had sent. As I checked the trim, my phone buzzed. A text from Angela. Can we talk? I looked at it for a long moment, then typed back. You can come by at 3, out back. Then, at 3 o'clock, she appeared at the edge of the yard, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, hair pulled back, no makeup, no entourage. She stopped a few feet from the porch, clutching a small box. I won't come inside unless you say, she said quietly. You can come onto the porch, I said, wiping paint off my hands with a rag. She stepped up slowly. For a moment neither of us spoke. The sounds of saws and hammers inside filled the gap. I'm living with a friend in Loveland, she said finally, working part-time at a clinic, trying to figure things out. I nodded. She held out the box. This is for you. Inside was Dad's old pocket knife and Mom's wedding band, both of which I'd assumed were lost. I found them in one of my boxes, she said. I didn't pawn everything, I couldn't. I'm sorry for what I did. I closed the box and set it on the railing. Thank you, I said. She looked around at the volunteers moving through the yard. You're really turning it into a center? Yes. Doe. Her eyes filled. Mom would have loved that. She would have, I said. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I was so angry at you. I thought you'd left me to handle everything. I didn't see the money. I didn't know how much you were doing. I didn't tell you, I said. That was my mistake. But it doesn't excuse how you treated me. She nodded slowly. I know. I'm in counseling, trying to understand why I felt so entitled. That's good, I said. I don't expect you to forgive me, she whispered. But I hope someday. I cut her off gently. Forgiveness is a process. It's not a switch. What matters is that you're doing the work. She looked at me for a long moment, then stepped back. Can I send you a card on their anniversary? That would be fine, I said, but don't expect me to reply right away. I won't, she said. She turned and walked down the steps. Halfway across the yard, she stopped. You raised me more than they did, she said quietly. I'm sorry I forgot that. Then she kept walking until she disappeared around the corner. I stood on the porch for a while, watching the volunteers carry out scraps of wood and old carpet. The sound of hammers picked up again. Inside, the colonel came up from the basement holding a clipboard. 2 more rooms cleared, he said. You're going to have a functional center by spring. That's the plan, I said. He glanced at me. You okay? I'm fine, I said. And I meant it. By evening, the day's work was done. The volunteers packed up, Marcus posted another update, and the house quieted. I walked through each room turning off lights, pausing to touch the fresh walls, the new fixtures, the clean floors. Upstairs, the pale blue room smelled of paint and possibility. Back in the kitchen, I sat at the table with a mug of coffee and opened my notebook. Under tomorrow's debt, I wrote, meet grant writer at 10. Call city inspector for final approval. Order signage for Veterans Center. Then, below that, I wrote, remember, kindness needs boundaries. I set the pen down and looked out the window. The yard was dark, snow melting into the soil, the porch light casting a soft circle on the steps where Angela had stood. This house had seen 4 decades of family meals, arguments, reconciliations, and loss. Now it was becoming something new, rooms for people who'd worn the same uniform I had, a place where they could start over without shame or hidden debts. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from Councilman Riley. Funding approved. You're good to go. I smiled, a small, tired smile, and closed my eyes for a moment. The steady hum of the heater filled the silence, warm air moving through the vents like a promise kept. New courtroom, new shouting, new eviction notices. Just work, neighbors, and a new mission. I got up, rinsed my mug, and hung it on a hook by the sink. The walls didn't echo anymore. The house is quiet now, but not empty. Fresh paint dries on the walls, tools are stacked neatly in the garage, and the scent of coffee lingers from the last volunteer shift. Every room carries the hum of new beginnings instead of the weight of old arguments. I stand at the kitchen window looking out at the yard where my sister handed me back our parents' keepsakes, and for the first time in years the memory feels less like a wound and more like a turning point. What happened here was never just about property. It was about choices, what you give, what you hide, what you tolerate, and where you finally draw the line. For years I believed that keeping the peace meant staying silent, but silence can breed entitlement. Standing up for yourself doesn't cancel compassion, it gives it shape. Angela's apology isn't a magic fix, it's a start. Boundaries don't erase love, they make it real. In uniform, I learned that discipline protects people. At home, I've learned that discipline protects relationships too. This house will soon welcome veterans who need a base to rebuild their lives, just as I needed one to rebuild mine. I pick up Mom's necklace from the counter and feel its weight in my palm. It's not a trophy. It's a reminder. You can be generous and still insist on respect. You can forgive without surrendering what's yours. You can build something better from what broke. The heater clicks on and warm air moves through the vents. Outside, the yard is dark and quiet. Inside, the future is already taking shape, steady and solid, waiting for whoever walks through the door next.